This is The Journey, podcast edition. If what you're building didn't come with a playbook, you're in the right place.
Welcome back to The Journey, podcast edition. I'm your host, Paul, and thanks for joining me. I'm glad you're here. Today's episode is called The Paradox of Success: Why Customers Fall Out of Love with Growing Brands. This episode is for every founder, every builder, every leader who has tasted growth and wondered why the shine wears off, why it doesn't seem to last forever, why customer love just kind of disappears at some point. Let's set the stage a little bit. So talking about that electric moment that every founder dreams about. You've been experimenting, hustling, talking to customers, iterating like crazy, then suddenly what you're doing, it sticks. The product clicks. Customers can't get enough. The energy inside your company is just buzzing. Investors are starting to call, maybe. Maybe your wait list grows overnight, maybe. Maybe it feels like everyone is talking about you. It's exciting. It's validating. It's also really chaotic, having been there myself. Teams are running just, flat out to keep up. Late nights, adrenaline, they're the norm, not really the exception. This is where the paradox starts to creep in. Because the very thing that you worked so hard to achieve, growth, plants the seeds for the challenges that come next. If we kind of walk through this cycle of what happens, I've seen this pattern repeat itself dozens of times over in dozens of companies, across industries, different shapes and sizes. The cycle, even with all that change and all that variation amongst companies, the cycle is remarkably consistent. Stage 1, exploration. Founder-led teams, they're scrappy and relentless. They experiment, they pivot, and above all, they talk to customers all the time. Every conversation fuels the next iteration. They're obsessed with finding that magic fit. That's how you are at the start. Stage 2, fit. At long last, you've got product market fit. Hooray! The fog lifts and things get a little bit less scary. You don't have to worry about your cash flow as much. Leaders, they start to plan with more certainty. The business feels more stable for the first time. But stability comes with new pressures. How to meet growing demand, how to build the team, how to scale your infrastructure. Stage 3, scaling. Your attention shifts. Founders and executives, senior staff, they dive into hiring. They set up supply chains. They build sales funnels. Time is spent doing that, where before, time spent directly listening to customers, it starts to shrink a little bit. Some still do it, but the urgency, it's not the same. There are only so many hours in the day after all. So you look forward instead of continuing to have those conversations with the same urgency that you once did. Stage 4, maturity. The company is now a real business. It has departments, processes, KPIs, planning cycles. Talking to customers often gets lumped into marketing activities or left to customer service teams. The founding obsession with listening to customers slowly starts to fade. Stage 5, drift. Months and years pass, staff turnover starts to erode that institutional memory of those scrappy early days. New employees, they just weren't there when everything was on the line and you were always talking to customers, always building around what you had and what those conversations surfaced. They might not fully understand the original mission of the company or the passion that fueled those early wins. Stage 6, shock. Eventually, something changes that is highly noticeable. It always does. Maybe a competitor enters the market landscape with a sharper offer. Maybe customer expectations shift. Maybe the company starts to drift away from its original values. Or maybe something weird goes on with the economy at a macro level, and that creates shockwaves through the company. Revenues plateau or start to decline, but the overhead, it stays at the same level. And all of a sudden, you've got people scrambling. There are leaders scrambling, teams are scrambling, and sometimes layoffs happen. Sound familiar? This cycle, it's the paradox of success. The growth that every founder craves becomes the reason they stumble, because the company loses sight of what made it successful in the first place: relentless engagement with customers. And the company also stops exercising those muscles around having customer conversations. They don't make it a habit. It's not a priority. When it happens, it's very ad hoc. So why does this happen? Here's kind of the core issue. The voice of the customer gets drowned out by the noise of growth. It's really as simple as that. In the early days, listening happens naturally. The founder, they're right there in the trenches with the rest of the staff, answering emails, running demos, doing customer calls. Customer's voice, it's impossible to ignore when everybody is immersed in it. As the company scales, though, customer conversations don't automatically scale with it. They're off in the corner. They're treated as optional or something that maybe you'll get to later. Another common mistake, confusing customer service with customer insights. Customer service teams are always going to be kind of the front line for existing customers when they have problems. But answering support tickets is not the same thing as uncovering deep, actionable insights about your customers' needs, motivations, and pain points. One of them is putting out fires. The other one, guiding your future, figuring out how to avoid fires. So this might feel familiar to you, or at the very least, you can see how it would happen. And, you want to figure out how to avoid it. The answer is in putting in a system and building the culture around that system that prioritizes customer conversations and figuring out what opportunities arise from the product of those conversations. So there's a framework that I put together called the Scalable Feedback Engine to kind of address this. And here's how it works. Step one, choose and empower a champion. This person is the voice of the customer inside your company. They're responsible for gathering feedback, distilling that feedback into insights, and making sure that those insights reach the right people in the organization and are considered and discussed robustly. Second step, build a research stack. Use the right mix of tools and processes to collect feedback systematically, not just when it's convenient. This might include surveys, interviews, product analytics, or even like forums and customer communities. It's different for every business what makes sense. And there's a lot of room to personalize it and customize this part of the framework to your business and your existing processes and team. Third step, you want to distill the insights. So the raw feedback, it's not enough. Someone needs to interpret it, spot patterns, and turn it into actionable information. Step number 4, you want to share this widely. So customer insights, they should flow into product, into marketing, into operations, and into leadership conversations. If insights, the insights that the champion generates through their work just live in a silo, they lose their power because they die in that same silo, right? Now, I mentioned, product marketing, operations, leadership. That might make it sound like this framework is the domain of big companies only. Not true. I actually find that implementing a system like this, it is most effective and most long-lived if you do it when you're a small company. So you can get this running with companies that are 5 people and it works. You just have to scale the systems, the process, and your expectations appropriately. Now, here's the key. Not every piece of feedback has to be actioned. The point isn't to blindly do everything customers asked for. The point is to build a culture of awareness and curiosity where decisions are made with a clear understanding of customer needs and shifts, which highlight opportunities. Let's talk about what makes for a great champion. Not just anyone can fill this role. I found that the most effective champions tend to share a few qualities. They're strong critical thinkers. They have some research and analytical chops. They can build relationships across teams internally. They've got a self-driven mindset when it comes to learning and when it comes to doing their job. Like they've got to be self-starters for sure. They have a communication style that blends efficiency with empathy. You know, you need to listen as much as you talk in a role like this. And I think probably, you know, just to go back to the curiosity part, like really the most important characteristic of this person is that they have an insatiable curiosity. They're driven to uncover hidden truths and share those truths. In some cases, product expertise is a part of this mix, but more often than not, champions become product experts by living in the space between customers and the business. So you don't need technical experts to do this role. You know, the really detailed, technical-oriented stuff that we get hung up on sometimes, it can be learned. You know, don't stress about that too much with this person. Look for those soft skills. Why does this matter? The paradox of success will touch every company eventually in their growth arc, whether it's, you know, small company, big company. Change is inevitable. The question is, are you going to be blindsided by that change, or will you be prepared to weather the storm? Will you be ready to adapt with resilience? Companies that build the scalable feedback engine inside their organization and prioritize the culture of curiosity see warning signs earlier than companies that don't. They notice when customer needs are shifting. They adapt with intention instead of scrambling with knee-jerk reactions. Informed leaders panic less. Informed teams adapt better. And informed organizations innovate in ways that surprise even themselves. Innovation can come from anywhere. You just have to be open to it. So here's the takeaway on this, on the paradox of success and how to combat it. If you're building or scaling a business, don't let growth silence your customers. Success is not just about finding product market fit. It's about preserving customer connection as you scale. The Scalable Feedback Engine, it's not really a luxury. It's the insurance policy that you can put in place against drift away from your customers. It's how you keep the spark alive, how you turn growth into lasting momentum. And remember, growth doesn't have to mean losing touch with customers. The businesses that endure are the ones that never stop listening. All right, and that's it for this episode of The Journey podcast edition. Check out the link in the show notes for our companion post with all of the good stuff that goes along with that.
And that's it for this episode of The Journey podcast edition. If you're building something from scratch or scaling something messy, make sure to follow, share, or just send this to someone else in the trenches. Until next time, keep climbing.